The Eve monthly economic report is something that is fairly unique in that we, as a gaming community, we get a report on the state of the Eve Online economy from CCP every month, which is really great because we can see the macro level of how the economy is doing. We can see how production is levels are going, how destruction levels are going, which which regions are importing or exporting the most goods. How many trillions of blue loots are being exported from C5, C6 wormholes. That's all interesting stuff that that you can see from the monthly economic report. And so we'll run through the 20 or 30 pages here. I won't talk about every single one. It's more like a high level thing. But together, feel free to ask any questions if this is the first time you're seeing this, or if if something seems odd to you. The first graph is always the production versus destruction versus mining graph, and that is very important for EVE Online because it tells a lot about the health of the current state of the game. So, for example, if you look at the red graph, the red line right here, that is production, and that has gone. If you go here, right here, that this November is the last November's expansion, the faction warfare expansion. And you can see that immediately we had a lot of production going on, and we had new ships introduced. There was a lot of excitement around faction warfare. So this is something that is very healthy, and something that is a very, very good development in EVE Online over the last 6 or 7 months, or close to 10 now. If we're looking at destruction is more or less flat. It hasn't increased all that much. It's been hovering around a trillion a day right here. That's this line right there, and that's that is only it is interrupted by very large battles. So this is the Battle of 4M2, for example. You can very, very clearly see that around New Year's Day 2021. Since then, there hasn't really been a huge war or a huge battle, and so the destruction levels are rather low. Mining was historically low last year, with very, very few opportunities, or overall not a lot of production going on, not a lot of destruction going on. So then there's also no need for mining, and also no desire for mining, because the mineral prices are going to be very low when destruction and production are low. So that's that's the level of mining that we came from last year. Since then, it has recovered quite significantly. It's almost doubled, and the trend is good. And if we see production, rising like this, then typically we're going to see mining follow suit. This on these graphs right here, you can see which section of space these activities are happening in. So, for example, production, you can see here production is definitely rising in nullsec. Also, destruction is rising in nullsec over the last few months, and also mining is rising in nullsec and going down in all of the other spaces. So this is an interesting graphic, a good addition that we received last year to this monthly economic report. Now, the monthly economic report then it goes into each specific type of raw material mine. So this is asteroid ore, which has been increasing. The gas mine has been increasing quite significantly, especially lately, after the large dread brawl that we saw at the, I think, at the end of September, 3-4 weeks ago, something like that. So definitely seeing an increase in gas mined. Ice rather less. And moon ore, the prices have recovered. So this is something that has increased the amount of moon ore mined because prices were incredibly low last year for Moon Ore, where it really wasn't worth it mining at all, in addition to the lack of demand from the production side. And now we have increased production and destruction, and also increased prices as a result in Moon Ore. I'm going to skip through these because that's imports and exports, and going to jump right into my favorite graph. And this is the ISK sinks and faucets. So this will tell you how is ISK, so the in-game currency, how is ISK coming into the game and going out of the game. It's essentially the fiscal policy of EVE Online. And typically what we have seen over the last years and decades actually is always a slowly increasing money supply, right? And typically what you also have in the real world is, a slowly increasing money supply and low scale inflation. So typically, you have more ISK entering the game would typically mean inflation. So if you have the same amount of goods with more money in the game, then higher prices are going to be paid for those goods. That's pretty simple and pretty logical, right? There is one moving part in that, and that's the ISK velocity. We'll look at that in a second right here. But the interesting thing this month is that we actually have a reduction in money supply, right? So this where we typically see a slight increase, this time around we have a quite a significant drop in money supply, and that's not because the ISK sinks were performing so highly, although we did have the SEC fees increase on manufacturing, but this is largely due to a very, very large active ISK delta. The active ISK delta is 78 trillion for September, and that means it's a little bit of bot bans, so we never quite know what how many bots have been banned and how much ISK has been confiscated and destroyed in that respect. Mostly what it is players going inactive. And to explain what that is, I'm going to move over here to our friend Matthew's graph, where he takes the monthly economic stuff and puts it into Power BI to explain it a little bit better. And here you can see this is the active ISK delta over time. So this is looking at the last 30 months or so of the this one number called active ISK delta, which is bot GM actions and players going active or inactive. And you can see that on most typical months this is a negative number, right? That means that more people are becoming inactive than returning. That's a fairly a fairly normal thing to happen in a game over time. But you can also see that we had two of the highest negative ISK deltas ever in the last 3 months. And this is a result very likely due to these spikes right here. So we had these spikes indicate two things. One, new content, so an expansion coming out. This is November 2022. That was the large faction warfare expansion. And then we have May here, which was another expansion, and we have August here, which was the Alliance tournament. On one or two of these occasions, people were getting short stint Omega time for free or Plex for free. And both of that will make people reactivate accounts, come back to accounts that haven't logged in for a while, even if they are subbed. And so we can see that these very large positive active ISK delta, so where people come back to the game, they are followed by the opposite reaction in the following month, which is quite logical. So you have people that haven't played EVE Online in a long time. They come back, they log in, maybe check it out for a month, but then a lot of them leave again, which is not what CCP hopes, but is what's fairly logical and normal to happen. Now, what is very interesting here is that the people going inactive takes 3 months. So the CCP definition is you have to be gone for 3 months to fall into this active ISK delta. And the November expansion actually did really well because this was a lot of people returning. This is not immediately this number, right? You would expect the people that came back here to drop off in these months right here, and these were rather low negative active ISK deltas. Now the May expansion had a more extreme reaction, and that's also because in May you got some free Omega time, and I don't think it was like that in November. So you give people something for free, you're gonna have a lot of people returning. So this right here is interesting, but it's important to understand when looking at the negative ISK delta and putting a shrinking money supply into context. It's really actually something that is quite rare. Now I already said so. The only ISK sink that significantly increased was the manufacturing, because we had the SEC taxes increased, and so that is going to be something that is going to increase the ISK sink over time, but not dramatically. And we did see blue loot from tier 5, tier 6 wormholes, from C5 and C6 wormholes, actually decreased a little bit this month. So that was also something that pumped 3 or 4 trillion less ISK into the system. But overall, we have a slightly reduced money supply. This is the commodity faucets over time. So for example, sleeper components, blue loot here, the Triglavian data, which is actually red loot, pictured in blue. So these aren't, in the last month, they haven't significantly changed all that much. You can see, some the miscellaneous one is special events where you have large payouts of ISK for various reasons, and sometimes you have these overseer personal effects, which is the orange line, which is especially during the Christmas event always goes crazy. So this is interesting, but over the last month it hasn't changed all that significantly. If we're looking at the sinks and faucets over time, you can see that transaction tax is jumping all over the place, but that's because of tax holidays that we sometimes see in here. Everything else isn't all that different than it was. Bounty prices overall are increasing a little bit over time, but not dramatically. And then this is the look at the money supply. So this is what I was talking about earlier, the total amount of ISK in the game. So that's 1,883 trillion, of which 1,500 is in characters and 371 is in corporations. You might think that this is a lot higher, but it's not. The corporations actually are holding a lot fewer ISK than you might think. And overall, it's been, over the last 2 or 3 months, it hasn't risen all that dramatically, and that's because of players going inactive. So players going inactive, so not logging in for 3 months, is actually a fairly has a negative impact on the money supply, which for the economy isn't a bad impact, right? Money leaving the system isn't bad, because it that typically fights inflation. And so if you're looking to buy cheaper stuff, buy cheaper ships, then ISK leaving the game is typically a good thing. It's even better if it's not your ISK leaving the game. So then we have the velocity of ISK, which is the last part of that equation of inflation. So typically, the higher the velocity of ISK, so the higher the more times one ISK exchanges hands in EVE Online, in the economy, the higher the inflation is going to be. Because imagine it this way: if you have a veteran coming back into the game with 1 trillion ISK, and he or she just sits there and doesn't use the ISK at all, it becomes active, but it doesn't really enter the system, then it has zero impact at all on inflation. If a veteran comes back with 1 trillion ISK and starts throwing that ISK around and buying up stuff, he's going to be driving up prices, that's a simple explanation of how the velocity of ISK impacts inflation overall. we are seeing a slight increase in the availability or in the money supply of ISK, but we're seeing a decrease in the velocity of ISK, and that's why we have such low inflation in EVE Online. All right. These are the economic indices. So the one thing that is very expensive compared to previous years is still minerals, and that is largely because of isogen. So still isogen prices are, I don't know, around 400, I'm guessing 400, 500, something like that. So isogen is keeping that mineral price index very high, and it's also the biggest culprit in expensive capital ships. So especially large ships are suffering under this much less the smaller ships. And so that's why the main issue we still see in the ecosystem of EVE Online is the high prices of capital ships. Everything else is not all that impacted. So primary producer indices and secondary producer price indices are comparatively not as high. What we're talking about there is, let me see, I'll pull up my cheat sheet here. So primary producer index, it's stuff like moon materials and advanced moon materials, or ice, P0 and P1, planetary materials, data cores, decryptors, blueprints. That's all in the PPPI, the blue line right there. And the secondary producer price index, the SPPI, is T2, T3 components, station components, planetary commodities above P1, and salvage materials and ancient salvage. So this is a look at the price levels overall, but it's really just minerals that are just off the chart here, as you can see there as well. And then the last graph I want to share with you is this one right here, because this shows the amount of blue loot leaving C5, C6 wormholes. And while it's a bit lower than in the month before, so we had over 20 trillion in the month before, now we're around 18 trillion here, it's still a massive amount, right? So it's compared to other ISK faucets, this is a massive amount. And this is, I'm not saying that it needs to be nerfed or anything. It just, I just keep mentioning this every month because it is something that that you need to design the game around, right? This is, I think, blue loot and C5, C6 wormholes has become such a significant ISK faucet that it's a benchmark for the risk and reward function in EVE Online, and it's something that you need to keep a close eye on. And one of these weeks, I think we'll do a more detailed analysis on which, on the risk reward formula for various activities in EVE Online, because I think it's in a lot of, like, it is core to understanding the health of the ecosystem. And so the more light I can shed onto that and discuss with you guys and explain to you guys, the better, I think. So yeah, that's the MER for September 2023. Feel free to put some questions in chat. I already saw some of them. I need to catch up on chat real quick. But feel free to put more